All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is James Pittman here, co-founder at Docketwise. Today is October 13th, and today's webinar is maximizing your in-house use of legal technology. And I have with me Colin Levy, who is a sort of tech guru whose focus is on in-house legal departments. And Colin, thanks so much for joining me. I'm really glad that you're able to make time and come to our webinar. Tell me about yourself. How did you get into this area? Legal technology in general, and then how how did you wind up focusing on in-house?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, my journey started, even prior to law school, actually, because when I graduated from college, I worked for a big firm in New York, creating e-discovery databases, maintaining them, creating them, what have you. And that gave me my first sort of exposure to technology in the practice of law. And then fast forward through law school, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about legal technology or technology at all, other than LexisNexis and Westlaw. And I found that a little bit curious because I just saw technology having such a dramatic impact upon so many other industries, and let the legal industry seem to be kind of keeping their heads in the sand a little bit. So I thought, okay, that's a little strange. So, when I started working as a lawyer, I continued to see a lack of use of technology and thought, I can't be the only one who's picking up on this and thinking it's a little strange. And surely there are others who want to do something about it. So what I ended up doing was, I didn't really know much about the space, but I surely thought I can't be the only one. So I reached out to people that I came across on LinkedIn and other social media who were either teaching or talking or creating legal tech, and really just wanted to have brief conversations with them to learn more about their thinking, about their journeys, about their processes, creating tech. And it was through those conversations I really honed in on my passion for legal tech and started to kind of share my own thoughts about the space and what I was hearing and learning from these many conversations I was having. And that since kind of blossomed into a really pretty active effort to continue to inform, inspire, and educate others about legal tech through social media, through webinars, through podcasts, through blog posts. So now I'm frequently asked to write and speak on various topics within legal tech. And that actually, the efforts on social media led me to this role that I now have with Malbec as their lawyer and also as their evangelist, which essentially means I assist with a number of different marketing and sales efforts pertaining to brand awareness, building the community around Malbec, writing blog posts, and just webinars and podcasts, and really just helping to kind of spread word about why Malbec's solution and other legal technologies are there to help you, and really to help kind of ensure that you're being as productive as you can be and most attuned to the needs of your clients.
And what exactly is the business of Malbec?
Absolutely. So Malbec creates a contract lifecycle management solution, primarily for legal departments that assists with every part of the contract lifecycle, from drafting and negotiating to redlining to implementation to and other post-signature elements. Really the whole gamut of contracting. And really we take an approach that acknowledges and recognizes that managing contracts is not something that is solely the domain of lawyers, but really the domain of a multitude of functions within a business, and they all have roles to play, and all should be collaborating together on each contracting matter that arises during the course of business as it grows.
All right, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about legal technology in the in-house setting and how it might differ from, from this tech stack or arrangement that you would have in a law firm. I mean, what are some of the main systems that an in-house legal department would need to have?
Sure. So there are a number of different tools I would argue a legal department should have. First and foremost, they should have a solution to manage your contracts, because businesses run on agreements, and you really need to be able to have some solution to manage your agreements, and not just manage them, but also be able to understand what is contained in your agreements, what are potential roadblocks in your contracts and why, and also allowing you to not have to reinvent the wheel every time you need to draft a new agreement, and you can draw upon agreements you've drafted before and use similar clauses and language to move the matter along and speed up contracting cycles. So that's first tool that I think is important to have. And then other tools that are really helpful to have, I think, are having some kind of IP management solution in place to help manage patents and trademarks. I think can be very useful. You can work with outside counsel, most companies do, but having a technology in-house to help assist with that management can be helpful and allow you to reduce your expense on outside counsel. I also think, quite frankly, having some kind of billing or billing management tool, like, for example, Bright Flag, to help manage kind of how things are operating, your expenses, and how different tools are working together. Because I think the more data you have as a legal department, the better off you'll be, and the more attuned you will be to the needs of your business, and the more you'll be able to tell a story in terms of what you're doing and why you're a valued partner to the business as a legal department, which I think is something that's very important. And then I think, another helpful tool to have as a legal department is certainly some way of managing your data privacy needs. So either that can be some online tool or something else, mainly just keep track of all the various privacy laws that come into play and how you're processing and tracking and securing your data. And certainly there are a number of tools that can help with that as well.
Mhm. Okay, what's a good methodology to use when evaluating various products? So let's say we're in a company, we're in a legal department of a small to medium-sized company, and we're tasked with sort of digitizing and creating a tech stack. How are we going to go about sort of thinking about how we're going to evaluate our products?
Yeah, so I think when you're evaluating products, it really starts with before you even start looking for products, understanding exactly what your problems are. What exactly are you trying to solve for? And importantly, what is an ideal solution or outcome look like? If you don't have a clear idea of what a good solution looks like, it's really hard to evaluate a potential tech tool without having that understanding in place. And also, if you don't understand kind of what problems you have, and you just start looking at tech tools thinking they could be useful, then you may end up with a solution in search of a problem, which is a very expensive place to be and not very helpful. It may actually hurt you over the long term in terms of your ability to evaluate and potentially incorporate other tech tools down the line as your needs change and grow.
Mhm. Okay, and so suppose we want to set up a requirements document. We're going to sort of give our impressions or grade each of these products that we're looking at. How might we go about doing that?
In terms of having a rubric for evaluating different products.
Like an RFI.
Yeah, so I think really it starts with understanding kind of, all right, what are your key functional requirements? What exactly are you looking for? You're looking for something that can just do Y, or looking for something that can do X, Y, and Z? You really want to be specific about what you're looking for, but also account for the fact that what you're looking for may not necessarily exist as you imagine it to be. So what would you like this thing to potentially accomplish, even if it doesn't necessarily look exactly as you would imagine it? Because I do think there oftentimes are issues arising when you do a RFP or other type of evaluative process that's comparison based, and a certain solution doesn't offer exactly what you're looking for. So I think there needs to be some built-in flexibility there to ensure that what you're looking at can do what you're looking for, or could be made to do what you're looking for in short order. But you can't just go off of well, this doesn't check this mark, and therefore check this box off, and therefore I'm just going to dismiss it out of hand. I really think that can be problematic and lead you to a solution that may do one thing well, but not do the other things you want it to do well. And along those lines, you also want to be sure that you're not evaluating things on the basis of doing too many things really well that may not have to do with one another, because sometimes you can have a solution that can do one thing really, really well. It may not be able to do something else really well. So in that case, you want to make sure that the solution can fit into your existing tech stack and supplement what you already have, as opposed to trying to replace everything. But I do think there are a lot of tech tools out there that are now moving towards a more platform-based type of approach, meaning that it does a number of things well and actually can be a platform for which you can grow and actually even potentially develop your own applications to help you without using any code. I do think that these no-code solutions are very, very helpful, especially those for skeptical of technologies and or are leery of technologies that may require some development work and that maybe involve coding. And you mentioned coding to a lot of people and they go running for the hills.
Right. Let's, you mentioned something about getting the most out of what you already had. And I had heard you say that somewhere else before about sometimes sometimes it can be about making the most out of what you already have versus getting something different. So I guess my question would be, what are some of the areas where you see people not making the most out of the technology that they already have?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about basic technologies already, like Microsoft Word, for example. Microsoft Word has so much functionality built into it. The problem is that it often is difficult to find exactly what you're looking for in Microsoft Word because everything is kind of layered. There are all of these multiple layers of functionality. And so really, if you're looking to do something, you should evaluate kind of how you're certainly using Word right now, and then looking at potentially other functions that Word may have and may offer. And this may require not just kind of looking at, your desktop, but actually going online and looking for different ways to learn more about this tool that you already use, because there's plenty of courses, for example, on how to use Microsoft Word better, or for example, Adobe Acrobat as well, how to use that better, or PowerPoint or Excel, or basically any of these products that exist that most people, use, but only use perhaps, a fifth of all the functionality that's contained
Right.
within a certain tool. So I do think there's something to be said for making the most of what your tools are that you have already, because if you can make better use of existing tools, that both saves you time and money from having to investigate and implement another tool when you already have some at your disposal.
So you mentioned some of these no-code solutions, and we're talking now about integrating different products, so allowing them to talk to one another. Is that what you're referring to with these no-code solutions? And if
Yeah,
so, what
absolutely.
are
So really what you can do with these no-code solutions is, for example, Brighter or Joseph, or, or Document in terms of document automation. There are a lot of these companies that allow you to kind of create different applications that all work with one another without having to code. And that saves you time, saves you effort. And also importantly, for many people, legal folks like control, really want to have specific needs met, and no code tools allow you to achieve that because you can design exactly what you need without having to kind of engage in any expensive, time consuming and confusing development work, because you can do it yourself without really doing much more than dragging and dropping things across the desktop.
Mhm. Okay. And let's talk about how you would go about setting up an implementation plan. I'm jumping a little bit, but as far as an implementation plan, what do you need to think about? So you have your in-house in a company. How are you going to roll out this technology so that, number one, you're minimizing disruption, you're maximizing people getting on board, you're picking a correct time frame, you're picking an auspicious time to do things. What are some of the considerations that go into planning for implementation of new technology?
Well, first and foremost, you want to make sure that you have not only, the decision maker on board with moving forward, but you have the users on board and understand and support what it is you're trying to put in place, and ensuring that they all are collaborating together from the get-go on what needs to happen and how they would like things to roll out. And that doesn't just mean having internal conversations. It really means having a collaborative, ongoing discussion with the vendor of choice about how you would like things to play out, what the time frame is, why that time frame exists, and kind of what mile markers you want to have in terms of how do we know when we've accomplished this or that. So milestones are really important as well. And understanding that implementation is not kind of just a matter of flipping on a switch. It's really a matter of ensuring that everything is lining up, and you're accounting for the fact that sometimes things may not operate exactly as you imagine them to be. and being okay with that and understanding that's just part of the process, because no technology is perfect. Humans design technologies. Humans are naturally imperfect. So you can't expect things that humans create to be perfect. So you have to account for those imperfections and kind of be open to the fact that you may have to adapt a little bit. You have to be a little bit flexible. You may have to just, tweak some things because things don't necessarily fall into place as you would expect them to be. So I think you want to have realistic expectations about not just the timing of the implementation, but about how it will play out, and accounting for that so that people aren't thinking, I thought we were supposed to be at this point by this time and we're not there. And there's no real openness about why that hasn't happened. So I think transparency and openness is another important element as well, in terms of when things don't necessarily work out as expected, you openly acknowledge that and you say, look, yes, we get it. Things aren't necessarily rolling out as planned, but this is why, and here's how we're moving forward. So I do think that the more collaborative and more transparent that the buyer and the seller can be on an ongoing basis when it comes to implementation, the more successful an implementation you will have.
Let's talk about some mistakes that people might make. I mean, what are some ways that you think people can make mistakes, both in evaluating their own technology needs, or in choosing products, or in setting up an implementation plan and carrying out implementation? I mean, where do you want to watch that you're not making missteps? And give me, if you have any war stories of missteps that you've seen people make that could be instructive, those would be good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's one story I can tell of a prior role that I had at a pretty big, complex company, and we were a fairly small legal department, and we needed a in-house contract management solution, but didn't have much budget for it. So we wanted to kind of build something in-house. The problem, though, is that we weren't collaborative as we needed to be when we were creating this contract management system, or sort of the bare bones version of one, because we as the lawyers hired some consultants and worked with the consultants on developing the solution, but we didn't really consult the actual users for a whole lot of input. We kind of just said, hey, we've created, by the time we had sort of a bare bones wireframe workable model, then we started asking for input from the users, and that was a huge oversight on our part, because at that point things had already been developed where it would have been expensive to redo things, and we needed to redo things as we learned from the input from the users, and it was problematic. So I do think that one of the first things you can do when you're thinking about going after a tech solution is understanding not just how you view using the tech, but how other users view using the tech, whether that's a tech you already use or whether that's a new piece of technology, because ultimately really what technology comes down to is people and process. You need to have people on board with using the technology that they already have, or on board with using a new piece of technology, and want them to see that it's not just about you, it's really about them and benefiting them more than it is you. Because if you're proposing something, you have to get buy-in from people, not just little buy-in, but figure of buy-in. You have to have support. And the way to build support is to make it seem like the problem you're trying to solve is not a problem that's specific to you. It is a problem that is really widely applicable to many people, and show them why it's a problem. And in addition, you really want to understand, okay, well, is this problem existing because of users not using an existing tech correctly? Is it a problem because of a process that is flawed and has a problematic part of it? You really want to make sure that your users and your people and your processes are aligned before you start looking at a new piece of technology, because you really want there to be a seamless transition from how things are to how things will be with this new piece of tech. And that can only happen if your people and processes are aligned. And that was another issue that I encountered in a prior role where, we were making use of existing tech pretty well, but we were still having issues. And the issues were, and this was really early in my career before I had a lot of insight into how things worked in legal departments, or as they apparently traditionally worked in legal departments. So I didn't see that there was a process issue. Because of that oversight that my department didn't account for, when we were trying to push forward for a new piece of tech, we realized that this new piece of tech was working perfectly, and there was no issue with it. The issue was it just exacerbated an existing process problem and put a really bright spotlight on that problem. And that made, things even worse than they were. And that is often a problem with tech, is that you kind of, encounter the shiny key syndrome, where you kind of see something shiny and cool and you want to go after it, but you don't understand or account for the fact that just because something seems really slick and cool doesn't mean it's really going to be slick and cool for your use case.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Understood. So, and then in terms of, the missteps that people might make in sort of evaluating what technology they need. I mean, where do people tend to lose perspective? I mean, or depart from, the right perspective in terms of evaluating their technology needs?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of different ways in which things can go awry. Number one is not having enough data informing you as to what problems exist and why they exist. Two is looking at technologies before you actually know what your budget is. If you don't know what your budget is, you shouldn't start looking at tech tools, because you need to ensure that you have the power and support, both uh verbally as well as monetarily, for whatever tool you're looking at. So that's another part of it. And three is ensuring that, even if you happen to be the decision maker and have the budget for this tool or what have you, that you want to make sure that you have the support of not just your leadership, but also those below you as well, that you are kind of asking these people to use whatever this new thing is. And so I think it's really, really important to make sure that you've got data and cultural support and awareness in place before you even begin searching or evaluating something, because otherwise you end up in a situation where you're fighting two battles. Number one, you're fighting the battle that this actual potentially expensive thing is worth it, because yeah, it's fitting in within your budget, but there's still going to be some expense and some change required. And two, you're fighting an internal battle to try to get your culture, that perhaps is not yet ready or supportive of this move, to be ready and supportive of this move quicker than they really want to be. And that can be a problem and can often lead to a lot of disarray, I think, down the line.
Mhm. And you talked about the cultural awareness. How would you go about, building the cultural awareness? What are we looking for in terms of cultural awareness?
Yeah, so there are a number of things I think you want to be looking for when it comes to cultural awareness. Is number one is you want to understand your leadership. You want to understand what their level and appetite for change is. You want to understand what they see, how they view problems, what they see as problems, what they don't see as problems, and make sure that they are aligned with how you view things. And you want to make sure you have their support for whatever it is you're trying to do, because you always need an internal champion push for whatever change you're trying to enact. And the more champions you can have, the better off you'll be. In addition, you want to make sure that the culture that is in place. Now, culture takes a long time to change and adapt. So you want to understand, you know, how best to make the case internally for whatever it is you're trying to do. And that means understanding your people, understanding how they work, understanding how they would like to be working, and then making the case using that knowledge to them that this change is aligned with how they view what they want to be doing, in an ideal world. And that takes time. You need to be patient, and you have to be focused, and you have to be persistent, because you won't often just get, a yes the minute you pop the question and ask, I'm thinking about doing this. You really have to be dedicated to it. And often that means having conversations again and again about why this needs to happen and why this is important, and why it's not just about you, but about other people. And really that means you kind of have to campaign for change in many ways. It's often a matter of becoming a little bit of an internal salesperson and understanding that, yeah, you have one priority, but your priority may not necessarily be the priority of someone else. And so really, you don't want to just say that their priorities matter and your priority matters. You want to make sure that those two priorities actually are the same. And so that really requires listening and communicating effectively, and patience and focus and tenacity. And really understanding that, things don't happen overnight. As quickly as you would like for things to move, they never happen as quickly as you want them to. And so you really need to be patient and lead with empathy and understand that, change is naturally hard for everyone, and it's particularly hard for legal professionals. And you have to account for that and accommodate for that and make it seem that this change is not just your idea, but it's really their idea. And this is all very easy to talk about and very kind of, seems very sort of axiomatic, but in reality, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And you have to be open to the fact that you may fail. You very well may fail, and that's okay. You learn and you grow and you understand why you failed and use those lessons to hopefully allow you to succeed the next time.
Let's talk about what some of the anxieties are that people may have, or some of the reasons why you might fail. I mean, in terms of people problems. And also, how do you see, in terms of adoption of technology, how do you think overall in-house legal departments rank relative to, say, law firms, relative to, say, the court system? I mean, are in-house departments doing a good job overall? And would you rate them as being closer to the forefront of digitization, or, have they been bringing up the rear or somewhere in the middle? I mean, just talking in broad generalities.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I used to think that legal departments were kind of at the forefront of digitization, and I think that sometimes can be misleading because oftentimes people forget that legal departments are often led by people who used to be at law firms, and so they bring with them the law firm mentality, which often is one that is more risk averse and more slower to act and more sort of not necessarily conducive to change, even though when you're working in a businesses change all the time and move very quickly. So I do think really legal departments aren't necessarily always at the forefront of change and digitization, but many are. It really depends on leadership. Likewise, at firms, leadership as well can vary wildly. You see some firms that are really moving pretty rapidly along the line in terms of innovation and tech adoption, whereas others aren't. And that really, I think, is a matter of leadership, and it's also, I think, a little bit of a generational gap as well. I do think that some of these older lawyers and older legal pros who've been at places for a long time kind of still are very much tied down to the history and the way things have been done for a long time. And legal in general is very much one that is very well steeped in history and tradition. Unfortunately, history and tradition is not going to grow your business. It's not going to win you more clients. Clients want data-driven, digital forward, actionable advice and insights. And those that are able to provide that quickly, efficiently, and cost effectively are going to be the winners over the long term. However, as we've seen, on the law firm side, law firms are very much relationship driven. I've worked with many legal leaders who work with outside counsel and, always get grumpy whenever they get the bill. But I ask them, well, have you thought about using someone else or moving somewhere else? I'm like, no, I've used them for years. I'm friends with this guy and his wife, and I know their kids well. So no, I couldn't do that. And I'm thinking, it's great that you're friends with this person and they know you well and all great, but you don't always want to do business with all of your friends. However, it's also a little bit more than that, because sometimes there is this other factor, which is the person you're friends with at a firm knows your business really, really well. So you don't want to have to kind of reinvent the wheel and re-educate someone on your business. So that's another reason why I think sometimes legal departments often feel tied to their law firm. So I do think that it's a little more complex than just kind of saying one side or the other are more innovative and digital friendly than the other.
Okay, fair enough. And how about some of the people problems? I mean, what are some of the anxieties, or just people? I mean, you hinted at it. There is a bit of a generation gap, but beyond that, how what can sort of get in the way, attitudes or other things that might get in the way of upgrading or digitizing?
Yeah, there's a number of things that can get in the way. One, for example, is honestly a lack of desire or incentive to change. Things may be working out just fine, and there really isn't a noticeable reason to have to change or adapt or incorporate tech. I think another could be that people just are just feeling complacent and feel very comfortable where they are, and so there isn't a whole lot of desire to want to leave their comfort zone because people are just proceeding as things are, and there is really no noticeable impact upon growth or the business. And so they feel like, oh, well, if we're doing just fine as are, why should we try to, change when no one's telling me that anything is going wrong? Well, just 'cause no one is necessarily telling you anything's going wrong, that's not necessarily good enough. You want to look at what the data is telling you in terms of really doing a deeper dive and understanding, all right, where, how well are we protecting revenue? How fast are we closing deals? What are our sales cycles look like? All these different data points that can give you a more fuller picture of what's going on in a business. And then also, I think there is, as I spoke to earlier, there is just a matter of leadership as well. Sometimes leadership just, are focused on things other than new technology and don't really see a connection between adopting a new piece of tech and a direct benefit or return on investment on the bottom line. And so you need to account for that and understand that and make that case. And also you kind of want to make the case of why doing things currently is not good enough. Because if you can't make the case of why doing things currently is not good enough, then you can't possibly make the case for why you should change. And really what I'm getting at here is that it's one thing to feel a certain way about something, but you really want to be looking at metrics and data and let metrics and data tell the story of what exists and what could exist, and use that as a way to make your business case for changing. Understanding, again, as I said earlier, that you're working with people, and people are naturally emotionally driven. So you need to kind of account for that and understand that and lead with empathy and understanding the fact that people may see the numbers and get it, but emotionally may still feel tied down to how they currently exist and operate.
Understood. Yeah, really good advice. So let's talk about some like practical aspects of this. How can the right legal technology help an in-house legal department accomplish certain things? Let's take them one by one. Accomplish lower costs. So with the right technology, how are you lowering costs?
Yeah. So for example, in the contract management space, the lowering of costs comes into play because by using a contract management solution, you're able to see how often how much time you're spending on negotiating a certain agreement, how often things are being held up, what potential clauses are problematic, and therefore you can try to potentially allow for alternative language to be used so that when you get a question about your standard document or your standard clause, you say, understood, what do you think about this language, without having to kind of go back and think about how, what should I respond? How should I respond? What should I be drafting here? Which can often slow down deal time. So there's that. Another thing that, contract management can help with in terms of speeding up deal cycles is allowing for all the different functions that need to review and negotiate an agreement, finance, privacy, IT, sales. They can all work asynchronously through a platform like Mobex, and therefore that speeds up time without having to wait for someone to kind of view something and then send it off to someone else and then send it off to someone else. And by that time, you've lost track of not only what version you're on, but who last changed the document. So those are some of the ways in which contract management solutions alone can help you save time and money. And then other tools like legal billing tools or vendor management tools can help. Is it can help you understand, what expenses you have, how that money is being spent, how long it's taken, what exactly work got done. And that can allow you to understand how to use your time more efficiently and how to use your vendors more efficiently as well. So I think that the more, and this again goes back to this theme that I've harped on a little bit during the course of the session, which is data. Data can really provide a lot of insights into how your business is operating now and how and where things can be improved, because you only have visibility into what you have visibility in. You often don't know what you don't have visibility in. And the more you can understand the data behind what other functions are doing and behind what you're doing, the more you'll be informed about sort of what the status quo looks like and what potentially could be made better. And technology can help, but you need to know what you need help with first.
Absolutely. How about driving revenue? So we talked about lowering costs, but now let's go to the other side of that equation and drive revenue. How have you seen the right combination of legal tech really help to propel either sales or other revenue generating activity?
Sure. Well, I'll use, the contract management example because I know that space exceptionally well.
Sure, that's right.
We've had a number of customers who used our solution who've had deal times increased by 50%, have had revenue increased by upwards of 30% because their ability to respond to requests, negotiate more quickly, allow for accommodating different types of requests that may come up that are common but may otherwise be time consuming. Using a tool like this can allow companies to be more adaptive, be more flexible without having to do much work and changing how they operate. They can just simply look at kind of how they've done things and use lessons learned right off the bat in response to a new customer. So that can really help. In addition, a collaborative tool allows for all these different functions to kind of understand what each other is doing. And I think oftentimes what you have in businesses is the head doesn't know what the tail is doing.
Mm,
And that can be a problem because if you're working through a transaction and you think, we're all set, we're ready to close, but we just need, IT or privacy to take a quick look at this. Well, how are they supposed to take a quick look if they haven't been led into the process earlier on, so they can understand kind of what the deal is, what they're trying to accomplish, what this business is. So allowing for people to work the way they want to work and as they need to work can allow for a faster cycle and allow for businesses to grow faster because everyone's working together rather than working in silos.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, how about reducing risk? So you talked about a little bit about data privacy, and I guess let's use that as an example and talk about other types of risks too. The right combination of technology, how does that help you to reduce the risks that you're encountering? And about the privacy issue, have you seen, what effect has GDPR really had on in-house legal departments? Have you seen that having a major impact?
So data privacy in general is something that I pay very close attention to, and most in-house departments at this point pay really close attention to because thanks to GDPR and other privacy laws, what data we collect, how we process that data, how long we hold on to that data are all extremely important things we need to keep track of. We need tools to do that because we're required to under GDPR. We're required to under the California Consumer Privacy Act, not to mention the fact that at least 27 plus jurisdictions in the US alone are all contemplating different privacy bills that more or less try to replicate in some ways the basic principles of GDPR and or the California Consumer Privacy Act. So therefore, that's basically a long way of saying that, you really need to understand how to comply and how you can maintain compliance with these different privacy laws. And that means evaluating kind of your agreements, what type of clauses you have in there, where the data you're collecting on your customers is, what types of data you're collecting, how long you're holding that data, who has access to it, for how long, why they need that data, who's it being shared with. And in addition, what potential sub-processors, meaning other vendors you work with, like Amazon Web Services, which a lot of companies use, or Google or what have you, how they're using your data or the data you're collecting. So there's a lot of different elements to data privacy, and it's very, not only is it important to comply, it's also legally really risky to not be fully compliant because the penalties for lack of compliance can be really pretty devastating. And so that just has put increased pressure on me as in-house counsel, as well as all in-house counsel, to not only pay very close attention to the privacy landscape and the privacy laws that exist, but what ones are coming down the pike, as well as understanding kind of, how we control for data and our processing and use of it. And there's a number of different solutions out there that can help with that through maintaining policies, through evaluating the strength of your clauses and protective measures you employ to protect data and secure it, and so on. And so, it's a big growing field. There are a lot of lawyers who focus almost exclusively on privacy, and technology, I think, has recognized the importance of privacy. So you see a number of different tools and vendors out there that are really solely focused on ensuring that companies are compliant with the various privacy laws that exist now and can be compliant with the privacy laws that may exist in the future.
Great. That's extremely interesting. And we've talked about revenue, we've talked about cost, we've talked about risk. Are there other ways, whatever they may be, that you can think of where the right technology really in an in-house department really helps you to transform the business, and what those other ways might be apart from the ones we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think that the more you can automate the time consuming, the routine, the fairly low risk work, the more productive you can be, and the more, I think, of a business partner you can be, and the more you can show your value to the business. And what I mean by that is, there are various tasks that I think in-house departments and lawyers at law firms do that are, routine, that are important to do, but aren't, hugely risky, but are time consuming. And that's where I think technology can really shine. We've seen a number of different, not just no code tools, but also document automation tools like Document, for example, which is one of the leading vendors in the space, can really assist with allowing for automating tasks that otherwise can be really time consuming. For example, for a law firm, intake can be a really time consuming process. And there are many tools out there that can automate that process, and therefore you're less spending time kind of reviewing forms and transcribing data and what have you. And that time could be better spent on other more valuable tasks. So I do think that automation is a huge area within tech that can really be a game changer for many lawyers and legal professionals, because of the fact that they now are able to spend their time on more valuable, more strategic work rather than kind of the routine and more sort of standardizable tasks that otherwise, they do, but they know that it's just misusing their time, because they know they have a lot of other things to get done that are potentially more valuable, but they know that this needs to get done as well.
And do you see corporate legal departments often building their own applications versus using commercially available products? Are there any situations that you've encountered where that really makes sense? Or, do you think we're in a situation where, no matter what the problem is, there's probably already a solution on the market for it?
So I'm going to give a lawyerly answer to that question, which
Okay.
depends. I think that, there are not necessarily technologies that exist out there for every possible situation or every possible problem. That doesn't mean there can't be. It just means that may not necessarily be one that exists right now. But that is why solutions that allow you to customize and create your own products and tools are so invaluable, because it allows you to accommodate for these situations which may be particularly unique to your business, that there may not necessarily be a tool out there that exists that specifically addresses it, but that doesn't mean you can't create it through, a no-code solution, or even a low-code solution, which requires a little bit of coding, but not anything overwhelming or scary. So that's basically a long way of saying is, context is really important there, and it really kind of depends on exactly what your business is and what your need is and what the problem is, because technology cannot necessarily predict the future. So you need to be able to account for kind of your own issues and what you need to get done now and potentially in the future.
Okay. In some institutions like universities, single sign-on is used, and do you see that as something that's being adopted by in-house legal departments? Is that common? And if so, what advantages does it offer?
Yeah, I mean, my company uses single sign-on. I think a lot of companies use single sign-on, and I think it is a very powerful and time-saving tool. But I also think that you need to be very careful in terms of ensuring that you've set it up securely, and that it works across your tech stack, because oftentimes there may be problems with user authentication, and the ability for someone to sign into all these different applications through a single portal. So I think it's a great technological advancement, but at the same time, you need to be careful with it and make sure you use it carefully and set it up specifically so that you're allowing for it to be as secure as you need it to be, but also not interfering with the ability for things to get done and for people to access what they need to access.
Okay. You want? How about now? I'm just going to sort of go along my sort of grab bag of things I wanted to talk about. I mean, can you name some popular tech shows for in-house lawyers, or any specific places where they might be able to go to get more information?
Yeah, sure. So I think for a more kind of in-depth look at sort of the state of play within the legal sphere and legal innovation, I happen to be a big fan of two sites. One is what formerly used to be called the Law Sites blog and is now called Law Next by Bob Ambrogi. That's a really good source of information. Another really good source is Legal Evolution, which is a long form blog site written by legal leaders, kind of evaluating the state of play in a very data driven, analytical way. I also think that there are a number of books that are out there that can really help. One that comes to mind is AI for Lawyers. I think another one came out a number of years ago by Jordan Furlong, but I think it's as relevant as ever, is Law as a Buyer's Market. And I also will be soon relaunching my own website, which features interviews and thoughts from legal leaders, and as well as thoughts of my own as well. So I look forward to sharing that once it is formally relaunched.
How about tech shows or conferences? Can you think of any of those?
Yeah, so there's a number of different tech shows and conferences. I mean, there's the ABA Tech Show in Chicago. There's ClioCon, the Clio Cloud Conference, which just took place in Nashville, Tennessee. So those are two probably the biggest ones. Of course, there's a number of other conferences as well. The World WCC, which focuses on contracting, is another great organization that hosts conferences as well that I think are great to attend for those that are particularly interested in contracts.
Okay. All right. Now I wanted to ask you your take. I'm going to name a couple of tech tools, and let me know if you use any of these. Some of the ones that I've heard are getting that are either underused, or they're things that are right under people's noses and they're not getting the most out of them. How about Grammarly?
So I use a tool like Grammarly. I don't use Grammarly myself because I think it's imperfect. But that being said, I do think that tools like Grammarly can be very helpful for proofreading and making sure that your writing is clearer and more concise.
How about Stay Focused?
I do not use Stay Focused. I have heard it is beneficial, but I don't have an opinion on it because I do not use it.
Okay. The Spark email app?
I know folks who use it. I think it can be useful. I've not used it myself.
Nimbus Screen Capture?
I've heard of it. I don't use it.
Okay. All right. Well, I just thought I'd throw those out there because I've heard a lot of buzz out of those, and wanted to get your opinion
There
on
is
them.
there is a lot of buzz. I happen to kind of I'm fairly picky about what I use in terms of the context of what I'm trying to get done.
Okay. All right. Well, Colin, this is great. You've really shared a lot of knowledge and information with us in a short period of time. The hour's pretty much flown by. I invite people. So you're relaunching your blog. What's that website, Colin?
So it is colinistlevy.com.
Okay, that's easy enough, right? And on there you are going to be proselytizing legal tech. And what else are you going to be doing on there? Is it just going to be your own writing, or are you doing other
It will be
things?
my own writing. It will be featured as interviews of leaders and a couple other offerings that I am not ready to share just yet.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. Great. All right. Well, Colin, again, it's been a pleasure having you, and we're going to have you back at some point. And yeah, and thanks so much for joining me and sharing about in-house legal tech.
My pleasure. Pleasure to be here. Thanks again.